For this chocolate fudge pudding cake, the magic is in how a pudding is created with a liquid poured on top. It is a rustic looking cake, but guess what? That's because you want that pudding underneath with a nice cakey layer on top. It's a classic, it's simple, it's perfect. Let's make some. This is all about chocolate pudding fudge cake. You know, I say my grandma a lot, and guess what? Grandma did make this, but do you know what it comes from? It's a convenience food from the time when microwaves were a newfangled appliance in the kitchen. Microwave companies came out with cookbooks, and this was a recipe in the cookbook. We're not gonna make it in a microwave. I've adapted this, we make it in the oven. But it was when Grandma had her radar range. We had one too growing up. Do you guys remember a radar range? That was the first big microwave. I mean, they were big. And you could make this right in the microwave. I don't wanna do that. We're gonna make it in the oven, and it's really simple because it is a cake that is magic in the sense that at the end you get a pudding layer on the bottom, a cakey layer on top, and it is like a hug, and a sweet, delicious chocolatey hug at that. So to start, we're gonna make a cake base. So we're gonna need some flour. This is truly simple. It's pretty much dump in a bowl, stir it together. And I know that sounds like okay, but it really is that easy. So some flour, some sugar. Notice how I measured my flour? I put it in a scoop, leveled it, and then swiped it off so you don't over measure. Some sugar. Now there's sugar in two components of this cake, so I wanna make sure that you know there's only some sugar in this and some sugar in the other. So we kind of delineate the two. And then some cocoa powder. I always use a Dutch processed cocoa powder. It's gonna give you that more deeper, darker note and kind of a richer flavor. So we're gonna put that right in there. I mean, it's cocoa. Like, there's absolutely no problem with that. A little bit of baking powder. So this is gonna give us the little bit of lift we need and the texture. It's gonna all come together for that. So we're gonna put that right in there. And then we have, of course, some salt. You need the salt. That's gonna balance all those flavors out, super important. You also need an egg, really simple here. 1 egg, and we're gonna put that right in. It's gonna give it a little bit more richness, gonna of course help with the structure. You need some milk. I always use whole milk because guess what? It has so much more flavor. And if you're gonna have a dessert like chocolate pudding fudge cake, believe me, there's no point in skimping at this point. We're gonna do some vanilla. Why vanilla? It brings out the chocolate notes. Anything to up your game of the chocolate, super important. And of course I use my homemade vanilla. I just always put them back in these little jars. You can check that recipe on my website. And then to finish it, some melted butter. So this was melted on the stove and then slightly cooled. What that is gonna do is just add, again, more richness. So to whisk it, just gonna quick get the egg. You know, in this sense, we are not making a cake that has the importance of structure and a certain crumb. Instead, what we're doing is making a layer that's gonna come together really simply. And this is more of a scoop cake. And this, what I mean by that is, it doesn't cut into beautiful pieces. It's one that you spoon out with that puddingy sauce underneath. So I'm sure you've seen recipes like this. This isn't reinventing the wheel here, but you know what it's great for? You don't have to celebrate with someone you love for Valentine's. You can just make this even for yourself and you'll be getting all the love you want because this is so delicious and it's so decadent, but in a really simple way. So I'm just whisking that together really, really simple, really, really quickly. And then guess what? We wanna up the chocolate a little bit more. So what I have here are chocolate chips. You can use bittersweet, you can use semi-sweet, you could even use milk chocolate. What it comes down to is what kind of chocolate do you like? I like more of a bitter note of chocolate. I think that's super important because I like that. Now, if you don't, use semi-sweet or milk chocolate. And we fold those in just because they're kind of hard to whisk. You can see it's almost like a brownie batter at this point, but not quite. So I have a greased baking dish. You can butter it, you can grease it, whatever makes you feel good about yourself. And then you can put all that batter right in there. Now, at first you're gonna say, well, this is nothing special. And if you've made this, you know what's coming, but what's coming is a second component to this. Now, when I was little, Grandma would make this. If we were coming up, we'd usually have probably something maybe like, we were maybe gonna go to a game at school or something that was later after school, so we had a little bit of time. So she would have frozen pizzas for us. Loved that. And then she'd make this. And it was the best day ever. You felt like you won the lottery. And so I'm gonna spread this out somewhat evenly, nothing perfect. And then what we're gonna do is put together some dry ingredients again to sprinkle on top. Now, again, you've probably seen things like this, but what I love about them is they're a great step. Like if you have kids or you wanna get someone into baking or just in the kitchen to have fun, this is a component that can really do that because look how simple that was. The next component's so simple, but then it also shows everyone kind of a magic trick, which is the best part. So for the topping, we're gonna do some brown sugar, which has a little bit more of that caramelly, molassesy note. A little bit more white granulated sugar, so we need to balance those two out. And then some more cocoa powder, because you guys should remember this is cocoa, this is chocolate, and again we're doing that Dutch processed. We're gonna put that right in there, and we wanna mix those together. So we just want a whisk to evenly combine. Now sometimes if your brown sugar is like mine, it needs to be whisked into submission a little bit. Mine got a little bit dry in that container, so if you need to pick it up and break it apart, but don't worry, it will break apart with the moisture we're gonna put on top of it too. But you know, you think brown sugar should last forever, and guess what? It doesn't. But yes, the brown sugar bears do help, and if you don't know what I mean, we're getting off topic, but I just think we should have a moment here. These are helpful. I forgot about it and I did not put it in, but you soak it in water. It's terracotta. It absorbs the water. You put it in your brown sugar. It keeps it fresh. I know a lot of people like the bread trick where you put a slice of bread, but you have to waste a slice of bread then, or a slice of apple. You waste a slice of apple. This thing actually works really well. I just didn't use it, so it didn't work well. So now we're gonna whisk that all together. This is also to show you that guess what? It doesn't have to be perfect all the time. We don't all have fresh brown sugar, and that's okay. So what I'm gonna do is take this first mixture we did. We're gonna sprinkle this dry mixture now over the top. You can be somewhat even and just kind of get it all over. It looks weird, but this is part of the magic. And as you're doing this, this is now what's gonna create, surprisingly, a sauce. And yes, it's gonna transfer underneath this whole cakey mixture we made. That's the beauty of it. And that's how simple this is. It's, you know, don't you sometimes love, I love a recipe that takes work, that takes skill, that takes some type of like knowledge that you gain over time. But then I also love these recipes that just work every time, that you don't have to think about and you just love them. The one thing I do love to do, and I know I'm gonna get kickback from you, hot coffee. I put coffee over this. You can do water. If you wanna do water, do that. I understand people don't like coffee. I'm gonna promise you that if you put coffee on this, you're not gonna taste the coffee, but the chocolate will be more rich and intense. It really brings out the flavor of that chocolate. Now, do water if you don't want coffee, but if you wanna up your game a little bit, do some coffee. And we're just going to, don't worry about it too much, but kind of just spread it over. If all of those dry mixtures don't get moistened, that's okay. You don't have to worry too much about that. And I think that's part of the magic too. So you pour this all over. It looks really gross, it looks really wrong, it looks like this won't do anything that it should, and guess what? We're gonna put it in the oven at this point, we're gonna bake it, then we're gonna get that hug that I was talking about. The pudding cake has come out, it's still warm, but it has cooled slightly. Now, the trick with this is, when you take it out of the oven, it's gonna jiggle quite a bit. Even as it's cooling, you can see how it still jiggles? See how those edges jiggle? That's because there's a pudding layer underneath. And the warmer it is like this, the more liquid that pudding layer is. As it cools completely or even chills, that pudding layer becomes much more solid, but also starts soaking into this cake layer on top. Personally, I think it's best to serve it warm with that really ooey, liquidy pudding underneath. But yeah, see how we have this beautiful fudgy cake on top? I mean, guys, if this isn't a thing made for, look, okay. Now, what I want you to see here though too, I need to go back in and get this. Do you see this? Look at that sauce. Look how it's just like this decadent. I forgot how much I love this. I'm gonna even scrape, I don't do this a lot, I'm gonna scrape the spoon off. I love this cake because it's simple, because it's delicious, but also it's really good. It tastes good, it has good flavor. And you know what, one of the reasons? That coffee we put in. That is decadent. You know the only thing it needs? It needs a scoop of ice cream on top. Because if you're going this far, go for the home run, go for the whole thing. It's delicious. It's delicious because, to me, it hits all those things I want. It gives me that creamy pudding layer. I love pudding. But then also gives you a soft, warm cake that has a little bit of perfect crumb on the edge. That's the important part to know, is that edge layer. When it first comes out, the edge is more set. But then as this cools and the residual heat finishes baking, it becomes set on top all throughout. That's the cake. But that pudding underneath, that transfers underneath that cake, that's always gonna be just a delicious fudgy pudding. That's what's great about this, a rich chocolate flavor. The richness brought out by, guess what I don't taste? I don't taste coffee at all, I taste rich chocolate. That's the essential, key, beautiful part of it. So what I hope you do with this, I hope you make it. It's super easy, it's super fun. I hope you share this video around so other people can see how easy and fun this is, and check my website, wyseguide.com, for this recipe and all my other recipes. Whether you're making it for Valentine's Day, whether you're making it for yourself on Valentine's Day, which is just as worth it as making it for someone else, enjoy it. That's the point of it.